Okay, hello everyone. I'm super excited to have Chris Berdik here tonight, and we are going to go over and talk about his book, Clamor, How Noise Took Over the World and How We Can Take It Back. And any of you who know No More Noise Toronto, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We are trying to take our cities back and have better places to sleep, live, work, and play. So welcome, Chris. Please take a few moments to introduce yourself and maybe share with us why you wrote this book and maybe why now.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Ingrid, and thank you, No More Noise Toronto, for having me here to talk about this book. Uh, so I am a science journalist. I've been doing this for quarter century or so. I write about a lot of scientific topics, and in 2018, I wrote a feature for the Boston Globe Sunday magazine about a public health researcher who was focused on noise. She was at Harvard School of Public Health. At the time, I thought about noise as something that bothered me from time to time. I didn't think about it as a pollutant. But then I started to do the reporting. I started to read the epidemiology and saw how many serious health impacts were tied to noise. Not just the hearing impacts, which are serious enough, but cardiovascular disease, stroke risk, type 2 diabetes, mental health issues, development issues, obesity, depression. You kind of go down the list, and noise was implicated. And I thought, this is amazing that there's a pollutant out there that has
Mhm.
such a broad swath that I hadn't really thought about, and probably a lot of people hadn't, and people can't even agree on the definition of it. So I thought this juxtaposition needs to be explored. I started to do more magazine stories on the topic. I wrote about noise in restaurants for Popular Science. I wrote about noise in nature for High Country News. I got a grant to go to India to talk to people who are active against noise there.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was just, I kept finding ways that this issue grew and grew and became more interesting rather than feeling like, oh, I've done this. Let's move on. And because of that, I thought this is worthy of a book. And I, proposed it to Norton, and they said go for it. And then, right as I was getting underway, COVID hit, so
Mm.
everything had to stop. And just to finish this thought, when everything stopped, I had to kind of put the book on ice, but it allowed me to think and read a lot. And it also, was at the time when we had this kind of weird hush that came on,
Was, wasn't
into
it
the cities.
amazing?
Well, it was, but it was kind of this thing where you felt like this is good, but also you couldn't escape the fullness of the context, which is that it took this global catastrophe
Hmm.
to lower the decibel levels by about four or five, depending on where you were.
Hmm.
And I thought, hmm, maybe there's something here to talk about, what our goals are when we are trying to fight noise, how important context is, what is our end game? That kind of became the driving idea as I was, doing the reporting throughout 2021, 2022. And then, of course, writing and rewriting this book. So that's kind of the story of the book in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, noise is a problem the world over, and we also have individual relationships to sound. And just in our preamble there, in our practice session, we were talking about how sound is something that we actually, it's not about us being against sound. It's not. It's about the unnecessary pieces of noise and parts of the soundscape that impact our health, impact our quality of life. And yet this has been an ongoing problem for decades. I mean, when they started banging metal in Roman times, right? There was noise, and that was noise pollution for their world. And now today we have modified mufflers, we have construction 24/7, we have waste collection pickup, and so it's a new old problem in this context of today. And now we have so much more research on the health impacts of noise. And when I think about noise, I mean, it was when I started researching it, I was looking at the laws, and it was basically it originated from health and safety, from workers, from employers trying to protect their workers or trying to protect themselves, however you want to look at it. And yet the average person who protects the public. And I think that's just a really big gap that we have today. So we're going to explore
Yeah.
this a little bit more. And so everyone, what we're going to do is I've got some opening questions and for Chris, and we're just going to start doing a little bit of a back and forth. And we've got a Q&A function at the bottom, and we also have a chat. And so I have many of you know Patrick, who's my University of Toronto political science student, and he's helping out in the back. So we will manage questions, and we certainly do want to take questions from you as well. So I'm going to start off with a quick little introduction of No More Noise Toronto for any of you who do not know who we are. We are a grassroots organization, and we're focused on the noises that wake us up, keep us up, and disturb us day and night. We have many supporters, over 1,550 individual members and associations that are also supporting us. And we're data and process oriented. I take sound level measurements from my balcony, and what you see behind me are the noise spikes that I'm subjected to. And that's what spurred me to start this, because when I looked at the data, it was all about averages, and none of us live with an average. So that's how I started to collect data and went, no, I'm not nuts. And I started doing that on other people's balconies, and I was like, no, you get 23 noise spikes over 100 decibels. And they're like, oh, I'm not nuts. No, you're not. So that's how we've become data and process oriented. And the process piece is because we can't even properly report noise, at least in Toronto, and I assume that that's in most and other places as well. We have 311, but other places don't even have that type of a functionality. So to me, it was a whole package that needed to be addressed. So we are engaged in the civic process at City Hall with the City of Toronto. I depute on a regular basis, and a number of you who are in the room tonight have done that as well. And we have pushed the needle, but we all know that there's more work to be done. And so we're lucky enough to have collaborative discussions with the city. So Chris, one of the goals of No More Noise Toronto is to not only raise up advocates to reduce noise, but also to present solutions as well, and to have the advocates present solutions. So whether that's noise cameras, whether that has to do with better processes of enforcement. So we've got a collaborative relationship with the City of Toronto. So to me, that's also one of the ways that we're doing things a little bit differently and moving the needle. And we're very lucky to collaborate with a lot of different organizations. Quiet Communities, I know you did a presentation for them. We're collaborating with them in the US, Toronto Metropolitan University, University of Toronto, Civic Tech, Esri Canada. We're just very thankful to have all of those supporters. So, my first question for you now, Chris, is one of the things in the book that really showed me how we have been underestimating and undervaluing noise and our hearing is how you describe the difference between how people are tested for vision loss versus hearing loss. So, if you can share with us a bit of what you've learned in your book, that would be great.
Yeah, happy to. This was a little detail that was brought to my attention by Charles Lieberman, who is a hearing researcher at Mass Eye and Ear here in Boston. And what he explained to me was the hearing test that we all go through it's the first screening test for having a threshold shift hearing loss is the beep test. We all know it. It's just kind of these beeps at every frequency that if you hear it, you raise your hand. If you don't hear it, then they raise the volume of the beep. And he explained to me that all that is your ability to sense that there is sound there. And he said, if we tested vision the same way as we test for hearing loss, the eye doctor would just say, look at that next line down on the eye chart. Is there anything there? Is there, you don't have to read the letters or the numbers or tell me whether the E is facing left or right or up or down. Just, can you see anything? And, it struck me that we do have this kind of, I don't know, very blunt instrument for understanding our hearing loss. And Charles Lieberman is one of the folks who researched what he calls and others now call hidden hearing loss, which is before anything shows up on an audiogram, before we lose the ability to just sense sound, we lose some of the fine-grained connections between our inner ear and our brain. The nerve endings that come off of the hair cells that connect to the auditory nerve, they're very vulnerable. They can succumb to noise, high intensity noise, much faster than the hair cells themselves. And so you will have a clean audiogram. You'll think you're fine, but you can't understand a conversation in a noisy room. These connections, you might hear somebody say, I can hear you, but I can't understand you. That's the
Hmm.
sort of symptom of what Lieberman and others would call hidden hearing loss. So that's kind of this, it really struck me. He said, we hear with our brains, not with our ears.
Hmm. And that whole connection between how our hearing actually happens, that we can tell we can tell direction because of that split second, and how our brain actually processes that is frankly amazing. And the book that I read about that was saying that our hearing is actually, as a process, more, I'm not going to use the right word for this, but more incredible than our vision.
It's, yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
faster in terms of,
Yes.
getting a signal to our brain. Hearing
Impact.
is faster and it never shuts off when we
Yes.
sleep. We'll get to this, but this is sort of an important piece of it.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, I was sharing with a friend about what I read in your book, and she was like, "Yeah, my mom, she just had this hearing test, and she came out just fine, but she says she doesn't hear birds anymore." And it
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, that's why. That is why." So thank you for that. So as I mentioned, we are a data and process oriented group, and you have a lot of data in your book, a lot of research, and as you've done in-depth studies with that. And one of the things that I believed was that basically we don't know enough about noise at the bedroom window, and back to those spikes. And that's where the averages to me just made no sense. So that's why I started to collect data about how often are people impacted, how often they're woken up at night. How many noise impacts do they feel they have a day? How many times are they disturbed? And this is where I mean, that is in epidemiology, that there is data for that, but it doesn't seem to be highlighted. So I highlighted that, and it's through crowdsourced data. And so that's where we started with creating a not 311 noise report, which had over 12,000 data points. And that's kind of what landed us on the map. And that's where I was curious if you've run into anyone that has kind of looked at this crowdsourced information, or if you see a place for crowdsourced information beside the other data that is collected through formal research.
Yeah, I do. And I think there are a couple thresholds for data which crowdsourced data may have a hard time meeting. And one
Okay.
might be in court
Mm,
as a legal standard for showing the evidence of harm. I recently spoke to the legal advisor for quiet communities because
mhm,
I really wanted to kind of dig a bit more into that piece of this. He said, essentially, you there are beyond just having the decibel meter validated that is on whatever app you're using. That's important.
mhm,
Some of these apps have higher quality decibel meters than others. There's
yeah,
also this question of how are you measuring the sound? So are you measuring it um, just as a snapshot? Do you have this app measuring sound over a long duration period so that you can actually collect that kind of LEQ, piece of data? Are you measuring it from your property line or indoors or outdoors? What distance
mhm,
from this? All these things that, you know, in a courtroom setting, people are going to try to pick apart.
yeah,
That's very tricky, and it's a similar thing for you know in a peer-reviewed publication, you're going to want to know all those things. And so the use of the app themselves is, I think, a very good thing. The crowdsourcing of data to get that kind of on the ground, reality of sound impacts, the spikes that you're talking about versus just having these modeled exposure maps based on like
mhm,
two sound meters within, how many square miles. I think it's super important. It's also, I think, really important for the visibility and, to basically
Hmm.
connect people who are experiencing this with one another, to build that case just among people who are suffering from sound or from noise, to sort of say, you're not the only person. Look where these problem areas are. It can guide further exploration, maybe with scientific partners from universities or
Hmm.
government. So I think it has a definite role to play, and I think it's being used more and more, to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's where when I was looking out my bedroom window at 3 o'clock in the morning and being angry at people that woke me up, I was like, how can I connect people? And people like to connect by complaining. And I thought, well, that's where we're going to create the Not 311 noise report, but we need to move beyond that. So, but it did create community, and that's kind of what you were alluding to as well.
Do you know about the app Soundprint?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
because I think I talk about that app all the time, and I really like it because uh, it does what we've just been talking about, but it also is very good at getting people to not just complain, but to provide a guide to places with quiet and with quality soundscape, to reward, excuse me, businesses and venues that uh, take the sound environment seriously for their patrons and their customers.
Yeah.
Um,
Could
I
you
think
just
that's
explain the
great.
app a little bit? I've just put the link in the chat. So if you can explain that, that'd
Sure.
be great.
This is an app that was launched in 20 late 2017 by a person in New York, a single man at the time. He may still be single, but he had a hard time hearing. He had a hearing impairment, and he was having a really hard time going on dates in the city because he would go to these restaurants and bars, and they were just overwhelming in terms of not being able to have a conversation. And so he thought, wouldn't it be great if the people in my situation who can't hear as well actually had a list of quiet restaurants and bars where we could go and with dates or with just friends and be able to talk.
Yeah.
And that became kind of something where he's like, well, maybe not just a list that we pass around, but something where it lives online and can be added to in a crowdsourced sort of way by people who have a smartphone and can take a decibel measurement when they're out to eat, when they're at a coffee shop, when they're at a store, and that will be mapped, and they can say some more things about the place, not just the decibels, but their reaction to the place, just even um, uh, some description,
Hmm.
and now it's international.
Yeah.
Pretty much any major city in North America or Europe, and many in Asia. I think some in Africa as well. Will have a map of places with these measurements created by users.
So for everyone who's in the Toronto area, we've got Zoomer Radio, and they are really big on sound print. And so I've put that link in the chat as well. So moving away from data now and talking about zoning, urban planning, sound doesn't listen to lines on a map, and our cities just keep getting more and more dense. And so you've got something happening on the ground, and people on the 45th floor are part of the party, or they hear the street noise. Have you seen any examples where cities are maybe managing that kind of noise a little bit better? Or the cultural piece, right? Because Toronto's known as a multicultural city. We've got Little Jamaica, and we've got all of these, and I mean New York has them too. Every city has them. But how have you seen other cities manage it, or what would you suggest?
Well, it may or may not surprise you that many cities struggle with this, and I have not come across a city that has, a serious large city that has kind of figured this out.
Okay.
In Europe, cities of a certain size have to create these noise maps where they, at the very least, every 5 years, map out where the noisiest places are. And now this is typically based on the easily measured noise, so it's transportation noise.
Yes.
So they're not going to deal with the restaurants or the street festivals or who knows what else noise is in our cities.
Hmm.
This is all based on transportation noise, which is a big source,
Yeah.
and they will sort of use that as these cities they're required to map it and sort of say, okay, here's our plan for reducing this area that has a lot more noise than this other area. And here also, if we're a big enough city, are some quiet areas that we want to protect from further noise encroachment.
Hmm.
Now, so that is at least a kind of an awareness of the problem and the potential for using data and making plans. But the fact is that they aren't required to do anything with the plans. They may or may
Yes.
not. They just have the plans, they have the maps, and in the next 5 years, they'll have another plan and another map.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that every one of these cities is falling down on the job, but I am saying that
Mhm.
this is not some kind of a locked and loaded mechanism for actually solving uh,
Yeah.
city noise. Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of my macro answer.
Hmm.
There is some interesting work being done on kind of in smaller scale ways that might be worth talking about. This quiet area piece of the equation, which I think is very
Hmm.
important to not just think about uh, the places where there is the most noise in your city, but do you have spaces in your city where people can escape the din? Is there green space? Is
Yeah.
there
Yeah. Somebody's
uh
got a question in the chat about any protection for parkland, right? It's about creating those little havens.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's this is a sort of work in progress to a large extent because the way they have done it traditionally in these noise plans is that they have a decibel threshold for defining a place as a quiet area, and it's usually about 55 decibels on an
Mhm.
average or below.
Yeah.
And so what that means in practice is that some of these cities will have a handful of these places somewhere deep in the middle of some giant park, or maybe on the outskirts of the city. And some researchers recently looked at that and said, well, if the purpose of these places and protecting them is to give the most people in your city an actual accessible place to get out of the din and have some restorative peace, maybe we should have more of them. Maybe we should have,
Hmm.
and not just based on a decibel measure, but actual places that, because people feel tranquil there, feel like they are getting some restoration, that there is still worth identifying as a place to protect. So Limerick, Ireland has been doing this, where they have, through the middle of Limerick is the River Shannon, and it is actually quite a noisy river because at that point it's going over these rapids. They have these weirs
Ah,
there
okay.
and these dams, and so but along the river, there's also a couple tributaries coming in there. Is the place where a lot of people in Limerick go to relax, and actually the sound of the river is
Hmm.
soothing and it masks the sounds of the city. You can kind of go there and escape, but it's definitely not 55 decibels. It's much louder than that. So it's this idea of uh, being able to identify places in your city that uh, that serve that purpose of providing a break and a sense of tranquility, and having a broad enough understanding of what that means,
Hmm.
that you're not just sort of sending people out to the remote
Yeah.
corner of the giant park. So
Yeah, well, and that's what I've learned through my sound level measurements is when I take measurements, windstorms can be 80 decibels through the pine trees.
Mhm.
Oceans, well, like waves can be super loud, but there's a different component to that sound. And that's where I believe that our body absorbs nature sounds much differently than construction, much differently than the combustion engine. Um, yeah, so thank you for that. So let's one more thing about cities that was super interesting with your book. Drones.
Mm.
Drones are coming, and I know a lot of people are like, well, where are they going to fly? What are they going to do? But I mean, I was talking again with quiet communities down in the US, and they were saying it's coming. Like, where are we going to be in 5 years with drones? So please share more about what you've discovered.
Yeah. So I met with a sort of a drone noise expert. He's from an acoustics firm in New Hampshire, they did a drone simulation study for Burlington, Vermont, just because they had some noise measurements from that city. Not because Burlington asked them to do it, but they thought, this is a some data we can take advantage of. Let's simulate. I think it might have been 500 drone deliveries into Burlington over Lake Champlain, and they came in and they thought uh, basically what they were trying to test was trying different routes. If we fly all the drones over the water as much as possible, then they disperse, or they go directly to where they're trying to go, or they follow the existing highway, and then it was basically trying to say, how would we minimize the noise exposure from these 500 deliveries by changing the routing of the drones. And this is I'm bringing it up because it is just one type of proactive research that could be done at city level and is not being done. These
Mhm.
drones right now are still very rare. I have never heard one come into my neighborhood, but they
Yeah.
are they are being piloted in great numbers, by either private companies who just do drone deliveries or by Amazon or I think Walmart, a couple of the other big box stores are
Wow.
piloting them, and McKinsey is estimating that the number of drone deliveries I think is going up by orders of magnitude every 5 years or so. So
Mm-hmm.
right now these are kind of we can kind of think about them as we do flying cars or robot butlers. They're sort of this uh futuristic thing.
Yeah. There, will they even come? And logistically, how is that actually going to work, right? But
But
yeah.
they, anywhere they've been tried, like in Australia or in Texas, in California, there have been a number of people who just say that noise, this tonal, high-pitched,
Mhm. Mhm.
whining. They call it's like a robot mosquito, like a flying leaf blower. Just
Oh
they
no.
can't.
No.
People, it's visceral, that
Yeah.
they're like, we're gonna shoot it out of the sky. So
Yep.
um that is something that I think Los Angeles at least has done one of those sort of mm, they planned how they could plan. So they're going to say, well, which city departments need to be involved here? We're going to have to get transportation obviously involved. We need to know, the public safety needs to be involved. We have to figure out, where the depot is going to go, where, obviously the
Hmm.
most drone activity is going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And are we going to license them? Are they going to have, what are the hours going to be? So all of
Yeah.
these things, uh, they're worth thinking about before drones
Yes.
are part of our lives.
Yeah,
I
because once they're
think
here, how do you get rid of them,
that's
And
right.
that's the thing. And I was always saying you can mitigate noise at the source. Well, how about we don't look at what route is quieter? How about we make them quieter right from the beginning? And what are there any laws about how much sound a drone can emit?
Right. So right now, I don't know the answer to that question. I know some laws about kind of where they can fly and where they can't fly, but that's
Hmm.
typically just, so they don't fly into airplanes. Um, I don't know too many kind of
Yeah.
actual municipal drone codes along those
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing is we there's the saying that we've kind of come up with is that the corporate agenda has been prioritized over public health. And, you know, back to like the sound of drones. I mean, this high-pitched whine, is it a large insect? I'm on a leaf blower coming out of the sky. Wow, that's going to get people going. But I think what people don't understand is that this is coming, and in 10 years we could have a lot of drone deliveries. And if we don't mitigate it now, and that's just another battle on the noise front. And so I really I thank you for that chapter in the book, because we've got somebody on the line here who also is very involved with cities and smart cities and the technology that cities can use. And so this is where I think technology is one of the solutions. Area sound level monitoring, for example, you know, like that is something that can help monitor the patios, the restaurants, the festivals. And it shouldn't be up to the festival producer. That should be something done by the city, and that's being done. I understand in Europe that there's area sound level monitoring where, you know, the sound levels are just broadcast to bylaw to the enforcement
Mm.
agencies, and there. But technology is also going to be one of those things, and drones are. I'm quite scared of leaf blowers flying in the sky. I'm not going to forget that one now. So let's talk a little bit now about the ISO standards for assessing soundscapes. I found
Mhm.
this super interesting. So explain to us what this is and how this came about. I found it an interesting story.
Sure. So I'll just start kind of even back up a bit and talk about the idea of a soundscape, which is sort of it's the auditory equivalent of a landscape. And if you think about a place, maybe it's a commercial district in a city, maybe it's a park, it could be a restaurant. All those places have particular sounds that define them and that you would often hear there. And some of them may be helpful sounds, and some of them may be less helpful, annoying sounds. Uh, but they all kind of collectively make up a soundscape of a place. So this, what you're looking at here, is something called the soundscape circumplex, and this was derived from some research by some Swedish researchers who said, you know, if we talk to somebody in a commercial district or a park, and we ask them to describe what they're hearing, you know, as an adjective, no matter what they say, we can probably plot it somewhere on this graph, and we'll just look at the X and Y axis here. Somewhere on the graph of being eventful or uneventful, kind of like more or less energy, and then pleasant or unpleasant. And so they said, well, if we can do that, then let's see what, you know, what's pleasant and eventful. You know, maybe there's lots of sound, maybe it's kind of loud, but it's pleasant. We'll call that end of it exciting. And what if it's, you know, lots of energy, lots of pretty loud, but it's unpleasant? That's kind of a chaotic soundscape. And so you can kind of go all the way around. So that is the sort of it's like a measuring stick for talking about something as big as as an entire soundscape. So that's what that is, and I can kind of get into how it's used a little bit, or how it could be
Mhm.
used if you want.
Yeah, I think that would be
Okay,
great.
yeah. So this is now, you know, what you once you have this measuring stick, then the question is, well, how do you uh properly, you know, figure out whether, you know, the park that you are trying to assess the soundscape of, where does it generally fit? And so they will often sort of take people on these sound walks, and they'll have, you know, a whole bunch of folks rate the what they're listening to on these scales. They won't show them the entire circuplex, but they'll have like the, you know, 7-point scale or whatever, between monotonous and exciting, between unpleasant and unpleasant. And you get enough people, what you start to see is that while, you know, our perception of a soundscape is definitely subjective, you know, it's influenced by our likes, our dislikes, our cultural background, our, you know, mood on any given day. You'll start to
Mhm.
see the assessments of the soundscape start to cluster in one place. You'll start to see kind of like a blob emerge where you can kind
Mhm.
of, you see this trend. And now people are saying, well, what if we could use the actual acoustic and other information from those soundscapes. Maybe there's a lot of greenery there. What are we hearing? Is this sound mostly people talking, or is it mostly, jets flying overhead? How many birds are we hearing? You name
Mhm.
it. All these pieces of data, and they can use. These are people at University College London. They're trying to use that data to see if they can use AI to predict how a soundscape will be assessed. So if you're planning some piece of urban infrastructure, you could sort of say, well, here's what we're going to have here. We're going to have this many roads. We're going to plant these trees, so we'll hear these birds. It's under a flyway for the nearest airport, so we're going to hear this many airplanes flying overhead, etc. And can we then predict what the soundscape is going to be um, experienced as by a trend of people, by most
Mhm.
people? Uh,
Mhm.
and that's kind of just it's like a tool to an urban planning tool that is still obviously very much under development because they're trying to create these models uh, to be able to use them in that way. And they have, they're still kind of on the lab bench rather than actually in the hands of urban planners. But that's the idea,
Mhm.
sort of being able to take this out of academia and make it something that cities can use to sort of say, well, we want to create like a tranquil courtyard between the wings of our hospital. And
Mhm.
then they have certain design measurements, they have their CAD drawings or what have you, and they could feed it into these models. And then the model could say, well, you're not getting that. This is going to be definitely not tranquil. It's going to be chaotic or whatever.
Mhm.
Let's make some changes to your urban design in order to kind of bring that back where your goal is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and that's where noise is and sound doesn't seem to even be a part of urban planning now. And we were talking about noise canyons previously, and that just seems to be when a building is already existing and then another one is built, that new building, all they need to do for their sound studies is talk about the sound that they emit, not how they are impacting the whole world around them. And that these people now, they may not have heard that modified muffler before because the sound could travel out.
Mm.
Now it's going to bounce all the way up. And that's where my fear really lies in our urban planning, because we're not managing for this now. And we just let noise be noise, get used to it, move to the country, whatever. And it's just like noise is sound of progress. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And so tools like this, I think, are really important to highlight and to bring into the mainstream.
Yeah. And then there's another one that's a little less kind of academic, I would say. People at McGill, there's a Sound in the City lab there. You may be familiar with them. They have been trying to come up with essentially like a virtual reality tool that can simulate a soundscape, um, you know, just as like they call it a sonic sketchpad. So you would be
Ah,
able to kind of put your buildings in place and your streetscape. So you would understand where the noise canyons are. You would understand where your interruptions to the noise path might be from, say, a bunch of trees, or a wall, any kind of impediment. You would know kind of, oh, I'm going to put the bus stop here versus there. I'm going to have outdoor seating at this restaurant or not. You can do
hmm.
these sort of adjustments at a city scale and see what the
Mm.
impacts are. It's not going to be perfect, but you can kind of, like, that's called a sketch pad. It's sort of a quick
Yeah.
prototyping of what you're going to get from making these changes in both the built environment and in kind of the policy environment, because you can sort of do things like, oh, what if we required all of the HVAC systems to be situated, you know, in the rear of the building? Or what if we didn't allow construction during these hours?
Hmm.
What would be the overall impact?
Yeah. Well, and then the thing is construction is not allowed during regular hours, but then provinces and governments allow exemptions. And that's the thing, is that there is one exemption after another. And there's, for example, a venue in downtown Toronto. It's an outdoor space called Stacked, and they have noise exemptions permits that were granted for every Saturday of the summer. And so these poor people that live there, they don't have a Saturday. They don't have that relaxation. And so,
Mm.
interesting. I'm going to take a couple questions from the chat here. So someone's been asking a number of questions. I'm kind of going to put them a little bit together. So the one of the questions is has the advent of electric cars made a difference in traffic noise? And I'm going to parlay that with a little bit of a story, because I don't know if you if in Los Angeles, the Waymo, the automatic cars, and the depot that they go to, they back up, they beep, they do, and they charge at night, and the residents that live around that area are losing their mind. So while electric cars might be, people think that they're a solution. There's now speakers outside of the cars for the vanity noise. And then what about these automated vehicles that are, beeping and backing up all the time? And then the other question, I'll get to in a moment. But so let's stick to the electric cars there. So what are your thoughts about electric cars and automated vehicles and all that other stuff?
Yeah, well, I love this question for a couple of reasons. One is that, you know, the larger answer is yes. The eventual switch from internal combustion engine to electric vehicle in cities will lower the decibel from traffic.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, this will happen. It's just a matter of like, oh, is it going to take 20 years? Is it going to take 50 years? I was just over in Copenhagen, where they have quite a lot of electric vehicles. Uh, there are some places that, I can't remember what their targets are, but they are very impressive. So that's the sort of the starting point. They then, of course, have to add sound. That's how quiet they
Safety.
are. You have to add sound for safety.
Yep.
And this is when things can get interesting and can be taken in a few different directions. We, again, I think, suffer from not thinking about the importance of sound in our environment enough. And the story that I write about is the electric buses they're introducing in London. The iconic red buses, they tens of thousands or 10,000 of them anyway, stitch the city together. They're everywhere, and they're changing over to electric. And then the transport authority wanted to kind of have a safety sound to, obviously, keep people from getting hit. And they had a request for proposal. And when they went to the first acoustics firm, the folks there said, "Well, what do you want these buses to sound like?" And the transport authority there is like, well, we have no idea. What? Just look at the
Right.
regulation. It's got to be a couple beeps. They've got to be this loud. If it's accelerating, I guess it goes up in pitch. That's all we know. Just do it. But the people at the acoustics firm thought, this is an opportunity to actually
Mhm.
make a big difference in the soundscape of the city. If in the future, as everyone predicts, the noise from traffic will be lower, then we will have these sounds that we can design. We can make them they have a function. They have to keep people safe. But beyond that, you actually have a lot of say so in what you're going to be hearing day in and day out from these vehicles. And so they went and they had groups of people doing workshops, stakeholders who needed to hear these sounds, like elderly people, people who had vision impairment, cyclists. And then they had people in the same group who didn't need to hear the sound, but would hear it all the time, the people that drove the buses. And they
Ah,
said, well, let's listen to, this iteration of the sound. Is this pleasant or not? What does it convey to you? All these questions. And then they would ask for, how could we make it better? They would implement those changes and they would listen again. And they just kept doing this so that by the end of it, they had kind of come up with a handful of sounds that people really were pretty unanimously in favor of, and they did the road tests with the same folks on a kind of a pilot bus, and so that's the way they're going, and it makes a lot of sense because these sounds are important, but the beauty of them is they can be changed. And if we start paying attention to them, if we start really sort of considering them something that matters,
Hmm.
then you know when the time comes when maybe the city's quieter, we don't need them to be so loud. Maybe people just
Hmm.
get tired of them. Then that is an area of our soundscape that we will have under control. And so I think it really matters how we approach the sounds that these vehicles will need to make. So that's the second point. The Waymos, I've heard the same stories. I actually talked to the creator of the change.org petition out of Santa Monica, who kind of started this. And people have been going out there and they're like vigilantes trying to stop the Waymos from coming into the lot. To Because when they get into the lot, they get confused and make a lot of noise. They honk at each other.
Must be crazy. Absolutely nuts.
But there are technological fixes that now, because of this uproar, have started to be implemented. Like, for instance, the Waymos can now be geo-fenced so that they know that they're in their lot and they're not out in the world anymore, and so they don't need to honk at one another. And there's another fix that they're trying to do that it involves the regulators, so it kind of is a little bit more involved in terms of the reverse, um,
Mm,
kind of, it's like a whine beep,
yeah.
a whining mixed with a beep.
Oh,
That so
sounds
they're
awful.
I know that they piloted it in the Santa Monica lot, but they haven't actually completely implemented it. It was quiet there for a few nights, but now it was back. The beeping was back, last
Yeah.
I checked, which is a few weeks ago.
To me, this is all just broken process, and I really like how you described what they did with the buses. They involved all of the stakeholders. Were these residents? Were these people? Did they ever do a test facility for these Waymo vehicles with
Mm,
people around them? And that's just where, again, there hasn't been any consideration of our soundscape. And so back to that, back to the ISO standards, where would that be? That
right.
is, that's in an upper quadrant somewhere, one of those. And that's where the consideration for people is severely lacking. And so there's another question here from Rika about the backup beeping noise of many trucks. And like there's a broadband and then a tonal. And right now we've got the tonal beep, beep, beep. And so back
Hmm.
to your habituation of sound, I mean, we've got construction going everywhere. So we got these cherry pickers. And so this is this random noise. And this is again another opportunity where I think as No More Noise Toronto and as anti-noise advocates, and that's why I deliberately didn't want to use the word quiet, because we cities will not be quiet, but they can be less noisy. And so
Yeah.
it's about managing those extra sounds that we've just taken for granted. Oh, you need to have a backup beeper. Well, those backup beepers were for people on the work site. I've seen
Hmm.
them. As soon as those garbage trucks or those dump trucks back out onto the street, that backup person is gone, the beeping's gone, and we're SOL
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
in our soundscape. And education and driver education about how these dump truck drivers don't need to rev their engines at 3 in the morning and try and gun it off a light. Like there's so many ways that people could be considered um, in process and in design and in planning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting up to 10 minutes to the hour here. So what do you think would move the needle in terms of policymakers accepting noise as a pollutant that needs to be managed for our health, needs to be managed for accessibility? I have a friend, Daniela, who's blind, and that really, when I went for a
Hmm.
walk with her, that just opened my eyes about how does she navigate the city, you know? And so, you know, there's like normal is a spectrum, and autism is on that spectrum, and then there's the other end of the spectrum. And I think we just need to design for people. But
Yeah,
how do we push what have you seen any success stories or have any ideas?
I have seen some promising ideas that I think may not penetrate the policymakers right away, but two things that I really think highly of. One is the healthy buildings movement. This is something that was started at the
Yeah.
Harvard School of Public Health, and it is basically saying, you know, we spend 90-ish% of our lives indoors. Those places don't need to just be you know, energy efficient or you name it, they need to be healthy. We need healthy environments. What does that mean? Well, they shouldn't have volatile organic compounds wafting up from the furniture and carpets or paint. They should have you know, obviously clean water, you know, not sort of dead end pipes where bacteria can grow. You want to have they need to be safe and well lit, and they need to have soundscapes that are both not going to damage our hearing or pile on chronic stress. And this is
Hmm.
a kind of a multi-part platform that Joe Allen and folks at Harvard have put together to sort of say, you know, it's all about having a healthy environment. We're not going to isolate noise and say you've got a noise problem. You're going to say you have an unhealthy building problem, and in this case, it's your noise, or in this case, it's you don't have proper ventilation. It's all part of a package, and I think the more that we can have sound and noise be, you know, part of these broader issues that they touch, the better. You know, there's research out of Mass General Hospital by cardiologists who looked at people who were living in noise exposed neighborhoods, and they did these PET scans on them, the full body, and they saw that these folks had more activity in their amygdalas, you know, the kind of the center of the fight or flight in our brains, and they had more activity in the inflammatory area that create the white blood cells, the inflammatory response. That's kind of a stress response, but when it's chronic, it causes all sorts of problems in our arteries. And these folks, after I think it might have been a 7-year or 10-year follow-up, had more heart attacks. And so what they
Hmm.
said was, you know, this is not just, you know, us connecting dots. We think that the, you know, American cardiology is the folks who create the guidelines for cardiologists to have risk assessments for their patients uh, need to ask them about noise. It should
Yeah,
be part of that. And
absolutely.
that's kind of just these ways that um, noise issues become more than somebody being annoyed, more than
Yeah,
something that we are complaining about. If you care about heart disease, if you care about getting adequate sleep, if you care about mental health, if you care about habitat conservation in our
absolutely.
environment, then you care about noise.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good way to move the needle. In some ways,
Mm.
maybe it's going to be it's always going to be incremental, as you know. Like the victories are never complete. uh,
Yes. Yeah.
but I think that's a way to kind of get more people to say, "Oh, this is why I should care." And the more people that understand that, the more pressure they put on their political leaders to
Yeah.
actually, you know, make changes.
Yeah, well, and that's a big thing. That's why I have New Mode, which is a campaign platform, is so that we can make it easy for people to put that pressure. But you know, there's lots of issues, and it gets lost in the noise of all the other issues of our times. Yet our health, if we don't have our health, we don't have anything, you
Mhm.
know, and that's just such a it's such a critical point. And finally, all of that research has led nobody, it's the noisemakers who say, oh, get over it, you'll get used to it. No, us that are impacted, we know we don't get used to it. And that's why I literally have to leave the city. And there's one of my questions that I ask people in some of my meetings is, have you ever considered moving? And 50% of the people say yes. The other 25% say, I wish I could, but I can't. And then there's a 25% who say no. I'm going to have one more question, and this is in regards to more about regulations. And so, did you investigate regulations regarding mufflers and how they were enforced in North American cities, and is it different in Europe? Because by far and away, the biggest noise source we have is transportation, and now we have all of these exhaust notes and backfiring, and that's what really happened during the
Hmm.
pandemic. And now we've had some regulations that there used to be a muffler inspection, a drive clean program in Ontario that was removed. Now it's a free for all, and this is what we've actually got a task force that we want to battle this. And so I'm curious what you've learned from other cities or what you've seen.
Uh, I have to say, that I don't know a ton about how one city versus another regulates this.
Hmm.
Um, as you know, I watched your recent presentation on motor vehicle noise and the law
Yeah.
in North America. The legal avenues for dealing with noise, it's a maze. It's a tangle of federal and in your case provincial, our case state and local laws. One agency is going to handle the car if it's moving, another one is going to handle it if it's not. Depending on what
Yep.
road it's on, that will change it. And so, I apologize. I just don't know the ins and
Yeah.
outs from one place to another.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to figure that out with quiet communities as well. There's a joint task force there. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quick and just do a little bit of a wrap up slide and share with people a little bit more. Somebody's saying, reminder, the indie is on the weekend. Ah, yeah, yeah. Talk about car culture. Okay. All right, there we are. So, thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out this tonight to learn a little bit more about noise and Chris's book here. And thank you for registering and for attending. Those of you, I did order a couple extra copies, so I'm going to have a raffle. I'm going to do a draw, and one of you are going to get a book. And it was a great read. And the bus story, and actually, Chris talking about healthy buildings, he has a really interesting story in here about the open office concept. I had to work in one of those. The half conversation, yes.
The Hafalog.
The Hafalog, exactly, exactly. So, so a bit about us. Please visit our website. Our website is nomorenoisetoronto.com, and we've got events coming up. I've got two in-person events coming up in September where I'm going to be speaking at Toronto Public Library, both in Downsview and at Runnymede. And Downsview is the place where Rogers Stadium has that 50,000 capacity outdoor stadium that the city's trying to manage. But I'm also going to probably have a couple just informal drop-ins in August just to connect with people. So we actually have started working groups for motor vehicle noise and amplified sound. Those are the two biggest noise issues here in Toronto. And in order to stay informed, please sign up for Noise News. And we thrive by donation. And so if you like what you see and you like what you hear, we always welcome your donation. They're tax deductible, administered through our partners' Small Change Fund. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to thank you very much, Chris. I find that I believe we are in the right time to move the needle. We are not only we are have a greater we have a greater I hope we have a greater appreciation for inclusivity and for people who are deaf, who are blind, who possibly have autism. Like there's this, we need to design cities for people, not cities for commerce. And that's just something that public health has been deprioritized for a long time. And the same thing with our climate. We thought we can do whatever we want to do. We can extract, we can pollute. Well, we're bumping up against all of these things. And to me, this is a time to rise up, and we have an opportunity both for climate, for equity, for health. All the ingredients are there. And I think there's a lot of people that we're fed up and we've had it. And to have a book like yours come out that validates, that provides solutions and provides a hope is really important. So thank you very much for writing it. And I'll give you a couple minutes to have some final thoughts.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me and for everyone here joined tonight. And I will say I should give you my website address just to let
Yes.
people, if we didn't get to your question or, we just want to talk about other noise issues, you can contact me that way. You can see more information about the book and other writing I do. It's just chrisberdik.com, and Burdick is B as in boy, ERDIK. So yeah, please check it out and contact me that way. I think you're right, Ingrid, that we are at a point where we are realizing that we're butting up against an untenable situation.
Hmm.
Like we did with climate, we are feeling that with our sonic spaces. We didn't evolve to exist in the kind of noise environments that we exist in now. That includes audible noise. It includes, the digital cacophony that we are dealing with day in and day out. Uh, we are joined by certain limits as humans in terms of how much, how our ears work, the vulnerabilities there, the lightning quick connections between our hearing and our fight or flight system in our bodies, and the serious, we only have so much attention that we can spread around.
Hmm.
We will be exhausted by it, and I think that's happening. I think people are recognizing it as consumers. I think they're recognizing it as citizens, and some solutions are coming along. They may not be as fast as we want, but
No.
they are coming, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we can get behind them, from many different directions. So
Hmm.
I hope that people feel a little bit optimistic, and I think I'll leave it there. I look forward to talking to everybody in the future on this issue.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much. And so, everyone, once again, I am so appreciative of the No More Noise community. Many of you have supported us in many ways, and you support us tonight. And I believe we're going to win because we're winning against air pollution. Something was done for air pollution, and that was something nobody could see, and we have no defense from breathing. We have to breathe. We have to listen. It is part of our defense. So I believe it's just a matter of time, finding the right argument, the right technology, I should say the right solutions. So, with all of this, I wish everyone a very good night, and I always wish you a very good sleep. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye bye.